everybody, to episode 3 of The Duel. Thanks for listening. How's everybody doing today? I said this would kind of be a bi-weekly thing, and it seems like this is one of those weeks where there's enough content to talk about. So I'm going to dive right into it and take a look at a few different things, give my opinions on a few things. I see that we retained about 70% of the listenership or viewership from episode 1, which is honestly higher than I expected. So thanks so much, guys, for listening and putting up with me and providing input. I think that I got pretty much ideas for this episode as well as 2 more or so with the amount of people that have reached out. So I'm thankful for that, and this will probably be a weekly show the next couple of weeks, and then I'll probably take a 2 or 3 week break from shows after that. So we'll probably get 3 shows in March, and then maybe 1 or 2 in April, depending on what happens in the game, what content you guys want me to do. If people really want me to do previews, then I can certainly do them. I just don't want to oversaturate things as far as episodes coming out. I imagine, once every 10 to 15 days, 2 a month would be sufficient, but if there's more to cover, there's more to cover. Today, I think I'm going to do a bit more of a quick hitter show, in that there's a few things that I want to talk about, a few things that we should touch on, but I also want to keep it a little bit shorter than the previous shows, just because first episode was almost 50 minutes. I thought that was a little long, and the second episode was 20 minutes longer than episode 1, so my goal to keep it shorter was not achieved, and made a show and a half, basically. So I'd like to keep this one a little shorter, but we've got a lot to discuss, so I'm going to dive right into it. First thing I want to do is talk about a couple of the forum topics, very briefly, give a couple shout-outs. First one I saw that piqued my interest was Humors, Kamara, and are apparently starting a podcast as well. This isn't, I don't think, a competitive thing, so, there's room for more than one podcast, and my idea was just to kind of discuss community topics and do previews and reviews of events. More than one person could do that, obviously, and anything that bridges the gap and allows for more community involvement from new players, old players, and veterans to mentors to mentees, people that want to use the advice and tips. I'm, of course, fresh back into the game 5-6 months ago after taking probably a 6-year break, whereas Kamara's more of a veteran player in modern times. So I think we have differing views on a few things, but anything that promotes community involvement, I'm 100% for. So I wish them luck, and hope that the quality is something that Tycoon can be proud of and will be enjoyable for everybody to listen to. That's stage 1, or step 1, or topic 1. Is I just wanted to, I heard that they were planning on coming out with their first episode in a couple weeks, so I wish them luck, and if they want to reach out to me as far as Kamara wanting tips on how to do things, I'm nothing fancy here. I'm just a USB mic and a few friends and just audio equipment. So I set up in, my basement or my room or wherever I want to record and just start to go to work type thing. So that's number 1. I wish them luck, and I hope it's good. I want to get the expectations up for you guys, but I hope it's something that provides value, because anything that involves the community and provides value in the game is something worthwhile. So that's topic 1. Topic 2, speaking of providing value to the game, and an initiative that I can get behind is the public gym restoration plan. And the big thing for me with this is this restoration plan, it's could be a game changer, just in the sense that when I came back to the game, I had some money left over. And I kind of knew what I was getting into as a returning player, which is basically, it's going to cost a lot to train, and your fighters won't actually be any good or top level good for probably a year after creation. And that's if you get somebody who has a good learning speed, which is not always a guarantee. That's a big thing. I knew what I was getting into. I knew what the roadblocks would be. And to be honest, I am 6 months in. I love it. I check it multiple times most days. And I don't regret my decision to get it. I know it's probably going to be another 6 months before anything from my creation, other than free agents, gets any good. But the big thing for me is, if I had no money, if I was coming in clean slate like a brand new player would, I wouldn't have stuck around. I'll tell you that right now. Because the landscape of the game, it's easily, I would say, a third of what it was when I originally played. The public gym options when I was a noob the first time, I had mentors, I had options to train. I still train a couple of my fighters out of public gyms just because I'm training them for upkeep, essentially. When I train them for upkeep, I train them public. When I'm training them to develop them, I train them private. That's kind of the way I've done things. If I didn't have the money for private training, and I knew it was going to take me a year to get good, and I basically had to scratch and claw and do that sort of thing, I wouldn't have stuck around. And I think that's the roadblock or the intimidations with a lot of new players is, okay, I have to stick with this for a year before I'm even in the conversation to be at the top level, be a good player, be in one of the top, 6, 8, 10 orgs. And, you get stories like breakthrough managers, like I know Action Jackson was one of them, Billy was one of them. You get guys that rise to the top with patience, but a lot of people don't have that patience. We live in a society where social media is instant, news is instant, everybody wants everything now. This is a web game that's going to take years to be good. And also, people play for years, and if they don't get the right advice, or they don't talk to the right people, or they don't have the right mentors, there are people who have been playing for years who will admit that they still suck, are still terrible. And I think the public gym initiative, anything that gives people more options for less money to make available training easier, will make the game, I think, more approachable, more competitive for the community, and more approachable for people who feel like they're not already Because so many people will feel like they're already behind the 8 ball at this stage. When you look at players that have millions upon millions upon millions of dollars, and they're getting $2,000 or $3,000 to fight in low level orgs and just scraping by because they have to pay $1,000 a week every week to train in a gym that is not great. Because Kozad's not going to do anything for you. You have to move to a public gym, and even then, the public gym options in some cities, you have one public gym. The options aren't there, 1 or 2. So I applaud a few of the guys for starting the initiative, Carter, and I've heard that there's a gym in Rio opening up. I've heard there's a gym in Hilo opening up. Ferocious Beast, I think it was. It posted in my thread. So I applaud you guys. Carter, if you're listening and you need donations or want me to reach out, you know me. I am staff on Pride FC, and I run Zenith Nutrition subs. So I have a bit of experience in all areas, and it's certainly something that I can either donate financially to, or if you are creating a starter fund for these gyms or want something specifically, I'm happy to help out in the project, because I think, as I said, anything that bridges the gap for new players is worthwhile, and anything that will grow the community is worthwhile, because, as I said, the scope of the game as it stands now is probably a third of the size of what it was back in 2011, for example. There was a lot more options. There was a lot more new players. There were a lot less super elite fighters, because private training was harder to acquire. And back when I played the first time, the game was only a year or 2 old, so everything took so long. Nobody was at that peak level of performance yet. Now that we're 10 years into this thing, a lot of people have fighters that are maxed out, have every hidden imaginable. Sometimes you roll lucky dice and get a guy with a chin and big power and private training and highly intelligent and big heart and everything. So sometimes you can knock a guy out and take a big punch and train with the best coaches in the world. Some guys have all the luck. Some guys have all the fun. But anything that makes the game more approachable, less intimidating, easier to get into, has a very positive outlook and very positive vote in my book. So I'm super excited for the restoration, see if people take advantage of that. Either new players seeing the public gym options, not VIPs who don't have a company opening a gym, non-VIPs seeing something they can do to help the game, getting VIPs and opening a gym, because this is something that has growth potential. It's the first thing I've seen in the game for a while that it's people who want to make the game better, not just saying they want to make the game better, but taking action in order to attempt to improve the ecosystem of the game itself. So that's my thoughts on that. And we actually have 5 events, 5 different fights to preview today, because small and big, because Empire 310K has reached out to me. They have 4 events this weekend, from the 8th through the 10th. and I'm going to take a look at the main event of all 4 of those shows. Give a few different cards a little bit of shine on this show and make a prediction, see how I do. Might take a look at the co-main events too, depending on time, but that's subjective, and we'll take a look at each of those cards individually and see what the priorities are there. And I also had a smaller org, one of Helsinki's fastest rising orgs, North Star Combat, reach out to me, and I'm going to do a main event preview for the main event of their next show, which is March the 12th. So that's going to be a fun one, because that'll be the first mid-size to small org, up-and-coming org that I've done a fight preview for in detail. And if you know John Doherty, you know that he runs a tight ship. Anybody who's fought in Dare knows that this is an org to look out for, obviously. And it's an interesting org to me because it uses a ring, it uses whole fight scoring. If you look at their event today, Michael Scarn versus Thomas Hawk was the main event. Took a look at it, read the results. If you're going round by round, Scarn probably beats Hawk 3 rounds to 2, but whole fight scoring, Thomas Hawk had a really dominant round in there, so the judges actually gave it to him. So it's an interesting system. Probably would have lost on the 10-point less scorecards, 48-47, but won in the whole fight scoring. So, ring, whole fight scoring, something a little different. And it's not totally different. Like, it's still MMA. It's not grappling and kickboxing and stuff, but it's nice to see a little bit different spin on it. 3-minute rounds. So it's set up like kickboxing, but MMA is its priority. So I'll take a look at that event on the 12th, preview that main event, and we'll be right back after this ad break. Sin City All-Stars, official sponsor of Pride FC, has everything you need after a tough night on the Strip. Come to Vegas for 2 genuine 160 products, as well as the biggest sponsor on the market. Sin City All-Stars, Vegas today. Urban Fighter in New York continues the tradition of providing stylish clothing for great prices. Need to stand out on your way to the cage? Don't delay and come and see what Urban Fighter has in store for you. Okay, everybody, it's preview time. Let's jump right into our event previews with the first preview of the day, and that is North Star Combat. March 12th, we've got a heavyweight main event of Colin the Hook McLaughlin versus Dude U. And this was a fight that I was asked to spotlight, and it's certainly an intriguing fight for a growing org. As I said, Helsinki's fastest growing org, and if you know anything about John, you know it'll be up near the top sooner rather than later. Well run, as I mentioned before the break. Whole fight scoring. Ring instead of cage, so it's a little bit different, and this is 5 rounds, 3 minutes, emanating from, I believe it's Hard Knocks in Helsinki, the 3,000-seat arena. Yes, it is. McLaughlin and you. Looking at my notes here, we've got Colin with a 22-14 record, 2-0 in North Star in his young North Star career, versus 8-3 Dude U, who is also 2-0. And this is, again, at 265. McLaughlin weighing in at 272. Dude U weighing in at 289 and cutting down. Same height, so no difference there. Big difference here, other than the ID difference, Dude U being at 293, McLaughlin being in the 270s, his fight experience. McLaughlin, this will be, as I said, his 37th fight, and this his 12th. One thing we're unlikely to need in this fight is judges. McLaughlin has been finished or finished 28 of his 36 fights. Dude Yu has only been to the judges once. So 10 of his 11 fights have been of the finish variety. Now, the big skill difference I see here is, even though it is arguably Collinsworth's skill, there's a sizable Muay Thai advantage. I think that'll be the key to this fight. I would advise Dude's manager to get his morale up as well, because his morale is a little bit lower. But I think the key to Colin winning this fight will be, can he get inside? Because he's at best on par in the boxing range, and Dude has a lot of power. Both fighters do. They're heavyweights, and they seem to be able to find the chin pretty well. So I would be looking to get inside, get out of striking range, clinch him up, and then take him down. Because he has a sizable Muay Thai advantage, a sizable wrestling advantage, and it looks like a BJJ advantage in some way. Now, Dude has never won by sub and has never lost by sub, so I don't know how good that purple belt actually is. But if I were Tom Bickle, that'd be something I'd be looking to test, because, as I said, you've got a sizable Muay Thai advantage primary-wise, a sizable wrestling advantage, and it does look like Colin's got some submission skills for heavyweight and some takedowns. So I think the easiest avenue to victory, and I am picking McLaughlin to win this fight, for the record, would be to clinch him up, take him down, and then attempt to submit him. And I think that's how he's going to win this fight, is frequent clinches, frequent takedowns, frequent submission attempts, and I think he's probably got a pretty good chance of getting a submission out of this. So I'm picking McLaughlin to win. I find it interesting that the bookies actually have it the other way around. So that's an interesting thing for me. As someone who doesn't bet very often, I would probably bet on the even money. Dude, you a 133 minus 133, and Colin is even money at plus 100. Ultimate Casino, it looks like, is the Dale Saws. He's providing odds on a couple of events, this being one of them. And I would take McLaughlin to win this fight. This is, again, emanating from Helsinki. It's got a full 10-fight card, 3,000-seat arena. I'm really intrigued, and I'll be watching a lot of North Star's events, because this seems like one of those orgs that not only is it well run or by someone with experience, but it also could be quickly rising in the mid-tier of the game, because recently, as I've mentioned before, we have had a lot of mid-tier type orgs fall out of the game recently, and I feel like everybody's trying to be the big guy, and ultimately that's my goal as well at some point, to be one of the bigger orgs. But these mid-tier orgs can become big in the right environment, and losing Sydney fights, and losing OG Cardinals, and losing Duel, and a lot of the mid-tier orgs have taken a hit recently. So to see a org that this is just their 6th event at North Star, already 14th in the world, which is pretty crazy, because I remember back in my day, I sound like an old man, there was at least 30, 35, 40 orcs competing for those mid-tier spots. And now it seems like the top 6 or 8 are the big guys, and then there's not a lot of people who want to make the effort to matchmake and do all the extra work for a mid-tier type org, which I'm glad to see that North Star is doing. And they're doing it straight through for every weight class, it looks like. They've got a little bit of everything, 135 through to 265 plus. I'll direct you to the forum thread for more information on their rule set, their contracts. John does a really good job of laying it out there. So if you're interested in perhaps fighting for North Star or joining North Star in some capacity, go to the forum thread, reach out to John. It's got all your information there, and that's the place to go. So I'll have a link to the event card in the description of the video, as well as in the description of the forum post, to go where you need to go to check this thing out. So thanks so much for North Star for being a part of the show today. And we're going to be taking a look at the 4 Empire main events for this upcoming weekend. They've got 1 on the 8th, 2 on the 9th, 1 on the 10th, because they are crazy. I'm going to do previews similar to this for all 4 of those fights, and then we'll put a wrap on the show for today. Promotional consideration paid for by the following: HGH Nutrients. When regular steroids just aren't good enough, visit HGH Nutrients, located on the New York High Street, an official sponsor of Empire 310K. They have 5 Monster 160 supplements for all of your fighting needs. The king of the EQ-bit is ready to serve you at HGH Nutrients in New York. Okay, so part 2 of the show, guys. I'm going to do the Empire 310K 4-event weekend. I'm just going to focus on the main events for those 4 events. I'm going to bang through those real quick, get this out to you guys, and then you can enjoy the show this weekend. Hopefully, I record this on the Wednesday. Hopefully, I can get it out to you by tonight, if not early tomorrow. But first part of the show is done. Now we're moving on to Empire in part 2 here. And I'm going to start with the Friday night event, March the 8th, which features a 145 main event of David Paddington versus Angelo Santiago. David Paddington is 14-5, 5-0 in Empire. Angelo is 19-8. 11-6 under the Empire banner, and for the reference, when I include those Empire records, I am also including the Global Coliseum portion of the Empire records, because that is, that morphed into Empire. Didn't really close, just underwent a change of name. So this is a real big style contrast, because San Diego is all about his KO power. He wins most of his fights by KO. Paddington's a sub guy. Paddington is an odd fighter in that this is his 20th fight, and he's never been KO'd, and he's never KO'd anyone. So it's really interesting to go up against a guy that is known for his power in this division. It'll be an interesting dilemma that he'll have to face. This is likely, I would think, I'm not sure on this, I'll consult with the Empire people, but this is likely a number 1 contender fight for Oscar Escobar, the champ in the 145-pound division. Paddington's on a 6-fight win streak. San Diego's on a 4-fight win streak. So somebody's streak's got to end here, and this is probably going to be the biggest test for David Paddington's chin to date. My prediction, though, is San Diego goes for the KO, and when he can't get it, he tends to be over aggressive. He lives and dies by winning by the KO most of the time. So I'm going to say Paddington somehow gets this to the ground and subs Angelo San Diego. So I'm taking David Paddington to win the main event at 145. And I'm going to have a link to all these cards in the forum description when I post the show. And I'd also like everybody else who's interested in doing so and listening to this show to post their predictions in the thread below the show, because I think it'll be fun to have a bit of a competition. I started with Sin 618, went 6-4 on that show, so I'm going to be keeping kind of a 2019 tally for myself for these preview shows. Next night, also emanating from the Empire Indoor Arena in New York, we've got a Friday night 185-pound main event. Chris Steve, who is the number one fighter in the world and the number one fighter in the game, against Boris Bolzowicz. Now, this fight is confusing to me, and I'm hoping that once I post the show, I'll get some more detailed explanation on what this is and why it's happening, but my thoughts on it are as follows. Number one, I've talked to Alfred, I've talked to Kamara a little bit. I've seen posts about the fight in the forums and such, and the biggest thing coming out of Kamara for Steve is he wanted to move up in weight. He wanted to, quote-unquote, challenge himself by moving up from 170 to 185, because he's 7-0 under the Empire banner, number one fighter in the game, 27-2. Mad respect for Chris Steve. He's a beast. Total beast. What I don't understand about this is the choice of opponent. Whether this was a hand-picked tune-up fight or test fight in the new weight division, or what the deal of the situation actually is. Because this is a fight that, while it intrigues me and I'm probably going to watch it, doesn't really make a lot of sense. Because I think if Steve wins, he's got very little to gain. And if Steve loses, that's embarrassing. Because Boris, no offense to Boris, but lost his first 3 fights under the Empire banner. Now he's won 2 in a row. So he's 2-3 in the org. And he's fighting the best fighter in the world. Chris Steve is challenging himself by going up in weight and fighting the 84th best guy in the weight class. So Boris is 20-8, 2-3 in Empire, another big KO guy. So this is another test of Steve's chin if he can connect. I think this should be based on the disparity in ranking and possibly skill. Probably a Chris Steve runaway, but you never know. All it can take is one lucky punch for someone to be a little bit embarrassed. And the other thing I noticed about this fight is it's a 185-pound fight, and Kamara says Steve is moving up in weight, which is technically true. But he's fighting an opponent in Boris who just moved up to 185 a couple of fights ago and was in the 170-pound division for his entire career and can still make the cut to 170. So technically, if he wanted this fight to happen, if anybody in Empire wanted this fight to happen, it could have happened at 170, should they so choose. So this is just a stylistic choice. As I said, Chris Steve 27-2, Boris 20-8. I think I'm gonna go probably a first or second round TKO for Chris Steve, and this is one of those fights that it confuses me because I view it as high risk, low reward. Because what does he gain from it? but he could also lose a lot if he happens to get unlucky and lose. So that'll be an interesting fight to watch on Friday. Now we go to the other Friday event in London. It's actually the one that's going to be happening first, but it's in London at the H2O Arena. We've got Morales versus Zegi, and Morales is 13-8. Zegi is 12-3. Zegi primarily a sub guy. Morales primarily a power guy, and this is probably one of the least important main event of the weekend, but it's still one that's could be interesting. It's contested at 205, and it's again another one of those contrast KO versus sub fights in that you got primarily a sub guy with a great chin versus a power guy with not much of a chin. If I look at the skill disparities in the primaries, it's very obvious where each person is going to want to go. And if I had to pick one, well, I'm previewing it, so I'm going to pick it. I'm picking Zegi. I think the brown belt and the exceptional wrestling will find a way to get to this to the floor, and I'm going to say he doesn't get the sub because Morales' submission defense looks relatively strong for a purple belt, but I'm going to say he works out a decision through takedowns and sub attempts and just greater activity. He's on a 3-fight win streak, so I think he's going to extend it here, and he could be looking at title contention after this at 205. If he wins this fight or a couple more, he could be right in the thick of challenging after the Gagnon. Is it Tuma? Sorry, I don't want to butcher the last name of the 205-pound champ because that's embarrassing. All right, Pekka. I gotta look at it. Pekka Toivonen. I'm sorry, Manitosan. You know I like you. I just can't pronounce some of these names. Pekka Toivonen versus Gagnon, which happens this weekend as well. It's on the undercard of the Chris Steve card, so that'll be one that, depending on who comes out of there, 205 could be flipped on its head a little bit across that way. And then we have the final event of the weekend in Tower versus Super Heavyweight, and this is the 4th time they've met. This happens at the Empire Indoor Arena on Sunday, March the 10th. We've got Tower and Super Heavyweight. And this is an interesting fight to me because it's the 4th time they've met. Tower's up 2-1. Trying to even the score or put this baby to bed, basically. Again, contested at 265 for the 265-pound title. Two managers I respect a lot in Alex and Ivan. And they've never needed the judges at all in the other 3 fights. I don't think they will here either. But Super Heavyweight's a guy who I look at his skills and go, okay, he doesn't look anything spectacular. You know, mediocre Muay Thai, blue belt, BJJ, but he's 12th in the weight class. He's got 30 of his 31 wins by KO. 31-5, Super Heavyweight, versus 17-2, Tower. And I just don't see an avenue to victory unless he catches him on the chin. And I think that's what he'll be going for here, is he'll be trying to catch him on the chin because I think Tower's going to be looking for takedowns. He's going to be looking for the submission. Obviously, he's going to try and use that BJJ advantage, brown belt versus blue belt. He's obviously a very good striker as well. He's well-rounded. He's got half of his wins by TKO and half of his wins by sub and decision, so he can get it done any way possible. He'll be looking for his 5th win in a row. But I'm going to take Tower by submission in this fight, and then I'll be interested to see who the next challenger for either of these guys is, because at this point, whoever wins this fight, Tower could be the #1 heavyweight in the world. Super heavyweight, if he wins, is probably a top 5 guy if he beats Power. And Drago, of course, I'm staff at Pride FC, and he's got our heavyweight champion, Phil Hellmuth Jr., who is a top 10 heavyweight as well. So it seems heavyweight seems to be his area of expertise. He's got quite a few good, talented fighters. Alex, of course, right now he holds 6 of the 7 Empire belts, and I know he wants to go for that 7th at some point eventually. So both these guys are ultra talented fighters and managers, so I'm really looking forward to this fight. But to recap all of my picks for those 4 events, we've got Paddington beating San Diego, Steve beating Bolzewicz, Zegi beating Morales, and then Tower beating Super Heavyweight. Those are my 4 predictions. Post your predictions in the thread below, and we'll have a little, hopefully somebody can track it, and we'll have a little bit of a contest to see who's got the best predictions of all the fights I preview in 2019. Hopefully we'll have a tracker for that. So, win percentage, number of wins, etc., etc. And I'll post all my results as well, so we'll see how that goes. But again, Empire Preview brought to you by Empire 310K and HGH Nutrients. Thank you guys for contributing to the show, sponsoring the show. I love doing these previews, so if anyone else wants to get involved, thank you to all the sponsors today. Urban Fighter, North Star Combat, trying to remember them all. HGH Nutrients, Sin City All-Stars. I try and hit everybody. Hopefully, I know next show, Sin and Matt would like to come on again and do another preview of one of their shows. And I know Pride has a big event coming up and wants to do a preview of one of their shows. So I should have enough content to go for at least the next couple of weeks in March. Always looking for sponsors or questions or topics you want me to hit on, or advice or feedback or any of that stuff. PM me in the game for the quickest response, and post in the forum, bump it up, keep it active and in the eyes of the community, and hopefully we can do as many episodes as possible and keep this up and keep people interested and get the community as involved as possible, because it's never my intention to make this a one-man show. It's not about me, it's about the game. I want the game involved. Alright guys, that's it for me for this week. I'll try and get this up to you as soon as possible, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks guys.